quorum.
Now, it's my understanding we're going to go direct to closed session. Is that right?
Yes, adjourn out of open session and into closed session. Yes. Well, you don't need to move, you can just adjourn.
We're going to adjourn the meeting to closed session.
Do you guys need it?
Oh, wait,
Caucus room.
All right, good.
All right, we have minutes from the April 7th. I'm sorry, we have the minutes. Oh, Chris, you have us here with the approval of the committee agenda work plan first.
Yes, I think that's,
Okay.
that's how the, because we didn't do that before.
All right, so hold on 1 second. In case there's any- So that's the work plan on ARMS 11, right? The agenda, our agenda for today, and then ARM 9 and ARM 11.
Correct.
Move approval. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion passes. Then the minutes,
Move approval.
or the, well, wait a minute, let's see, we have approval of the minutes. We have the
That's consent.
consent. So does anybody want us to take the, I'm sorry, Brian, do we have to, because it's minutes, do we have to approve the consent items?
It's a consent, you can approve the consent agenda, or you
No.
can take it separately, it's at your pleasure.
But it is for board approval? It's an
Yes.
approval on.
Yes, you can
Does
vote.
anyone want to move the consent agenda? Or are there any questions?
I'll move both items.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay. All right, then Chris, the audit, the quality assessment.
Thank you,
I
Madam
turn
Chair.
it over to you.
So the purpose of this item is to present the results of the external quality assurance review that was conducted in March 2011 of audit services. The international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing require that an external assessment be conducted at least once every 5 years by a qualified independent reviewer. And so we embarked on selecting a firm to do that external review for us. The firm that was selected was Schoberg Eveshank Consulting, and they are here to answer any questions that you may have. They started the review in March 2011 and concluded it in May 2011. And based on the results of their review, their opinion is that Audit Services' internal quality control system is in partial conformance with international, the IAA standards for the period September 30th, 2006 to March 31st, 2011. They listed several internal quality control deficiencies that are included in the report, and so we're here to answer any questions that you may have on the report.
Does the committee have any questions of the report? Do we approve the report or just accept it, Chris?
You just accept it, it's not an action item.
Okay, I think I'd like to request of Chris Ford, who's our currently head of audits, that as with all of our other audits, that any questions that were raised that you follow up with us over time for corrective actions.
Yes, we will develop a formal corrective action plan, and as you will see in, I think it's item 8, when we go over the proposed work plan for the Audits and Risk Management Committee for the next fiscal year, I'm suggesting that we include corrective action on the, or follow-up on the corrective action for the QAR at every meeting that the committee has until the recommendations are fully implemented.
You'll put that on our work plan.
That's on the
So
work
on the
plan
work plan.
if that's what you
Okay.
desire, and I would recommend that we do that.
So we'll, when we get to 8. If there are no other questions, thank you very much for all your hard work on our behalf. We certainly appreciate it and gives us guidance on how to do things better, which is very important. Anything else from the committee? Thank you very much. Alrighty, then update, Robin, update on business continuity and disaster recovery review.
So this is a follow-up on an audit that occurred in July of 2010, or actually, the information was presented both at the April and July meetings in 2010. And we've had periodic updates since that time, letting you know our progress in establishing an alternate BRC location within the Sacramento region. I'm happy to report that we're at the final stages of having that BRC operational. We expect to be able to use it in July. The other part of this item talks about our plans for an out-of-region BRC, which we had initially mentioned combining with a member service center site. We are reevaluating, or we need to reevaluate that decision in light of the in-region BRC that we have chosen because of its capabilities. And so we would like to do that over the course of the next year by conducting a formal impact analysis and then assessing our needs for a BRC location in addition to what we are establishing at the Quest location, which is on the former McClellan Air Force Base. So we would expect to come back to you either at the end of this next fiscal year or early in the following year with the results of that assessment and recommendations as to whether we need an out-of-region BRC based on our revised business impact analysis.
Are there any questions from the committee? You know, Rob, when I read through this, just because it's not anything really I've ever had much experience with, which is I mean, I get to watch television and, you know, the tsunami and the earthquake meltdown and so on and so forth. I mean, the nuclear meltdowns and whatnot, and one can envision the entire Northern California floating away in a flood and such. Why is there two layers of, why are you doing two, are you doing different things at the two different sites?
You mean why do we still have the FTB site? Yeah. So we had, our original site was at the Franchise Tax Board, which is a service that Franchise Tax Board provides for us free of charge at this point. Well, this is a fit place where we can resume operations. So for critical operations, we would have a small staff in the event of an emergency where we could, for example, have phones up and running or be able to make sure our benefit payments go out, operate trades from the investment perspective. So it would be a minimized operation, and we have a certain list of functions that we want to be able to recover in 24 hours. Okay, so did I give you enough information? So the question, I mean, in the...
Things like data and all that's all backed up everywhere.
Right, well, that's part of disaster recovery. So there's two parts to this business, what would be called business continuity planning.
So business continuity is when you're looking at how do you keep yourself running.
Running in the event of
as a risk matter. And
right.
then your continuity, I mean, your data recovery, all of that would be in the...
As a part of that.
I get it, okay.
And this is really the Business Resumption Center, so the physical location. We have an out-of-state through the Office of Information Technology. All of the services that they provide for us are, the disaster recovery site is out of state. So from a disaster recovery perspective, and Janice, help me if I'm, from a disaster recovery perspective, we're really talking about the servers that we have here that we would need to bring up in the Quest site, so.
Okay. Any questions from anybody else? Harry? Okay, Harry, can you press your button? The button? Sorry. Is it pressed? Somehow, okay, you're there.
I can use my teacher's voice.
Oh, wait a minute, I've got it, I've got it. Takes me just a little bit of time to get reacclimated to my techie self here. You should be on, is it green?
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Beth. To be honest with you, this isn't something I don't think I've ever thought of what appears in this agenda item. As I was reading this item, I thought to myself, it's great that we have people within our organization that are thinking about these types of issues, and that we have Mr. Yetman here as the consultant to the board. I'd never thought of this, and I think about a lot of things. And this was not one of them. And I really, in all sincerity, I mean, it's really, it's very important, especially in light of our conversations about risks. And, the magnitude of this institution and the effect that it has on the market and the effect that it has on hundreds of thousands of people's lives who are dependent upon their retirement check that they get every month that they've earned. And in the event of a disaster, what would we do? So my question is how does what we are doing currently and are proposing the change, how does this institution compare to other like institutions in terms of these types of plans? Other pension funds, are they thinking about this? Corporations that are $150 billion in assets, are they doing? Are we the 10 being the best plans? Where are we relative to, being in comparison to others?
I don't have all the historical information that would provide a complete answer, but I'll give you my perspective at this point in time. I think that through the course of this process, there have been, we have engaged with experts in this field to come up with approaches that make sense for us as an organization, given the value of the organization, its contribution to society. And I think with moving to this next level with our Business Resumption Center, we have put ourselves in a place where we are prepared for an external disaster in a way that we are confident we could operate. Whereas with the FTB site, we were in competition with other people who would be subject to the same environmental concern, and we were not first in line. So I think we're all more comfortable having this Quest location. I think what we do know is that we are going to continue to mature our impact analysis, which is this process that we need to go through to make sure that we have, in fact, identified the most critical functions that need to be dealt with in the 24-hour, 3-day, week, month window. That it's really a business management process, and as our business changes, we need to keep that refreshed. And that's what we want to, it's a process. It's not a static event. So we have staff that are experts in the area, we have consciousness about it, and it is something that we will continually assess and evaluate and report to you on our capabilities.
Terry?
Thank you. Robin, you evaluate and assess and so on. Is there, in this organization or any organizations that you're aware of similar to this, actually done a simulation or test?
We actually go through a test annually.
We do.
Yeah. So we have an annual test where we go through various business scenarios to make sure that they're operational. So, and that is best practice. So.
Did we have a virus last time or something? What was it?
Yeah.
Lots of different
Yes.
scenarios.
Right.
Different calamities.
Including the board
Right.
situation.
Right.
What happens to
Don't
us?
tell them that.
We get grilled.
Yeah. Right, so there are a series of tests that occur. We have quarterly meetings where we talk about various events that can occur that are safety related or natural disaster related. So we have a robust program around this that includes testing. For this year's test, we will actually do it as a part of the Quest completion. So to accept that site, we will make it the site of our test.
Okay.
And I would just add, I mean, they really are very helpful in helping us think about the things that we would have to go through in a non-reactionary way. So I think they're excellent. I like when we go through them.
Any other comment on the business continuity and disaster recovery review? Robin, thank you for thinking about the things the rest of us don't think about. Very much appreciated. We have the employer reporting process, charter schools. Chris, is that right? Peter Haley?
Yes, Peter Haley is
Thank you, Peter, for joining us today.
Good afternoon, committee. Mike is on here. Back there in August, we made a Thanks. Back in August, we made a presentation regarding charter schools. At that time, the committee requested some additional information on the employer reporting process and how charter schools might differ in that reporting. There's a brief write-up in the board item on that, and I've got a presentation to go with that, if you'd like to see the presentation. Okay. The presentation, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, it was a brief write-up, and it was only 493 words.
Okay.
As indicated in the board item, we identified employers with a unique identifier in the corporate database. So let's first look at a charter school process without a unique identifier and how their payroll data is submitted to the CalSTRS. First, it goes to the school district, and the school district then compiles that information together, and we'll submit that to the County Office of Education. That is known as the report source. The report source will then submit that to CalSTRS. Without a unique identifier, the charter school's data is commingled with the other school district sites, and we lose visibility of the specific school site reporting. The district reports to the COE, and the COE compiles all the data, reports to CalSTRS. Now let's get an example where the charter school has its own unique identifier. You can recognize it in the database. It reports directly to the County Office of Education, who then pulls that information together and reports to CalSTRS. With a unique ID, CalSTRS can tell if the report unit is missing from the report, and we can follow up to determine why the data is missing. We do not drill down to the member level. Members can be reported in various ways. You could have a person that's either a 10 pay, which is reported September through June, or an 11 pay that is August through June, or you can have the 12 pay that is the July through June. So you can have a member's data that's missing off a report, but that's not an anomaly. And so really what we're looking at is to see whether a district is reporting to us, or in this case, a charter school is reporting to us. So let's step through what a typical month would look like for an employer in reporting. They process their payroll for September. Within 5 days, 95% of the contributions are due to the system. Within 15 days, 100% of the contributions are due to the system. At this point, we don't have any data yet. In 30 days, the data is now due, so we can reconcile the data to the money. During this period of time, the employers can also inquire against the system. And you've probably heard about the Employer Reporting Project and how we've improved the data coming into the system. And they use the Secure Employer website. And during that whole month, they can actually query against the database and check it to see how the data is coming in and to see how clean it is. So it improves the accuracy. Over the last couple of years, we've seen that the accuracy, before it was coming in, like we had an error rate of about between 4 and 5%. This year, I think we're going to see it under 0.5%, so less than 1%. So the accuracy has improved tremendously. Next, we have the October 30th payroll is processed. If the report hasn't been submitted yet, it's also going to be, they have to do 95% of the contributions again, but also on November 15th, the report is now delinquent. And at the same time, they're also due with 100% of the contributions for the October period. At this point, we're going to take a look at how many actually report sources and report units we have within the system. We have 62 report sources, which are the large districts, as well as state agencies and County Office of Education. Currently, there's 1,641 report units in the system, or that report through the report sources. Of the charter schools, we have 915 active charter schools. 836 have elected CalSTRS, and 496 of them have unique IDs, which is leaving us 340, I believe, that do not have unique IDs and are being reported through their districts.
Those 915 active charter schools, so that would be the total number of charter schools, independent or dependent combined?
Correct. They're actually the ones that have been authorized by the Department of Education.
Okay, and if you go back one slide, please. Where it says 1641, so there's actually, you do differentiate independent charter schools from dependent charter schools, because independent charter schools would have one additional hurdle one additional step in the reporting process.
The independents have a unique ID on them.
So they have unique IDs.
Correct.
Thanks, Peter.
Harry, since you brought it up, could you just explain the difference between the independent and the dependent?
The dependent charter school would be a charter school that is still, say, in the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District.
Uh-huh.
A dependent charter school would still have the elected Santa Monica Malibu Board of Education as its governing body.
As its governing body. Okay.
They would be free of a lot of regulations, would have a lot more independence, but they would be, the governing body would be the elected school board. Revenues would go through that school board into the school sites.
And so what you're
An
saying is
independent charter school elects its own board,
okay.
separate from the publicly elected board. They can appoint a board, and the money goes directly to that independent board, who then directs it to the schools.
So the dependent schools are going through the Santa
school
Monica School
district.
Reporting
Right
District,
through the
and
school
the independent are their own ID.
We're losing the visibility of the dependent ones because it's going through the district.
Okay, then you're saying in relation to this set of numbers, when it's 915 active charter schools, are those dependent or independent?
They're both. And actually
They're both.
and 836 have elected CalSTRS, and so the difference between the 915 and 836 are either Social Security or PARS or some other system.
Okay, so then of the 836, the 496 are the independent, and the remainder would be what you're describing as dependent.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Are you, Harry, did you have any more comment? Okay, Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So from an audit perspective, it's reasonable, correct me if I'm wrong, is it reasonable to presume that the independent districts could be an auditable entity such that they have
Yes.
their own? Okay.
Since they're an ID.
What about the dependent charter schools? And let me give you the context in which I ask. The history behind this report and the reason that we're looking at this is that the board expressed some interest in making sure that we gain adequate audit coverage of the charter schools. And so they wanted to gain a better understanding of how the charter schools reported. That's the genesis of where this is from. And so my question is, okay, now that I have it, what do we do with this? So would the dependent charter schools be auditable entities, or would you audit them in conjunction with the unit to which they report?
They would be part of the district audit. So if the district audit was conducted,
Right,
then most likely they'd see that there was a charter school operating within that district.
right,
They could have selected part of that as their sample.
okay. They may have.
Right,
or-
may
yeah,
have,
right,
correct.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any more questions on that particular item? All right. Any more questions in general? Well timed.
I would just
Sure.
Just comment that this is an area that I would think we would continue to closely monitor, given the proliferation of charter schools and the likelihood that they may continue to expand, especially in the area of the independent charters, and its potential impact from an audit risk perspective it should be something that we continue to monitor. So just speaking as one member of this committee, I appreciated the new information that I've received, and Bob, Mr. Yetman's overview as to why it's here in this committee, and then looking forward, given the landscape, I think this is an area that we want to keep our eye on.
In line with that, given this was reporting to us, because we're trying to follow where there may or may not be problems, has this ID number helped you, do you feel, to clean up the situation?
Yeah, definitely having the independent, or the unique identifier for the charter school gives us the ability to monitor when new charter schools come on, if they elect CalSTRS, and then, hopefully be able to keep track of them. If the data doesn't come in, we can follow up with the County Office of Education and say, why wasn't the data there this month? So it is helpful.
Do you feel are you working on other outstanding problem solution sets for this at the moment?
Part of the challenges with charter schools is they do like to have their autonomy from regulations. And so it's difficult to put something in place to say you have to use this ID. And I think that's one of the challenges we do have, is if the charter school stays dependent and stays under the county, stays under the district, to ensure that the district reports that data to us. So it's really a matter of education to the districts.
Have you had much disciplinary problem? I mean, when it's brought to their attention that it's their pensions or whatever, has it self-disciplined more or less?
I believe so. I haven't seen any real issues with the reporting of the data from the charter schools recently. We do have an analyst that's assigned directly to work with the charter schools. And whenever a new charter school is formed, we contact them, tell them about CalSTRS and reporting requirements.
Okay. Sure. No, that's what we're here for, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if CalSTRS sent an audit crew down to one of these integrated, or what did you call them, dependent or dependent ones, right? Would that audit, is there a way to identify ex ante before they go in that there is a charter school affiliated with this organization, so they know that going in, such that it can be part of the audit plan?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Peter. We appreciate the update and glad to see it's going better.
Thank you.
Chris, I think you're our wrap-up.
Item 8 is the committee's input on the fiscal year 11-12 work plan. This is the time of year when the committees develop the work plans for the coming year. So I provided some information, which I hope stimulated some thoughts around items that you'd like to see on the committee work plan for the future. I provided in attachment 1 a top 10 list for audit committees.
Forgive me, Chris, what ARM page are you on?
Okay, this is ARM 55.
55. I'm trying to keep the request to speak queue on my computer, so.
So on ARM 55, I had provided as an attachment to the agenda item a top 10 to-do list for audit committees that I found just in my internet searches. It's from KPMG's Audit Committee Institute, and I used it and tried to translate the top 10 list into actionable items for the committee. As you see, starting on ARM 55, some of the areas are focusing on financial reporting, risk, understanding accounting changes on the horizon, reviewing the organization's whistleblower and compliance programs, understanding the company's tax risks, continuing on the next page, monitoring fair value assessments and other assumptions that work their way into the financial statements, consider whether our disclosures in the financial statement are plain English enough for a layperson, and particularly for our members whose trust we're reporting on. Reassessing management's controls around key operational risk, setting expectations for the internal external auditors, talking about IT governance, and the last one was making time to review and discuss the report of the, I think that's the National Audit Committee Directors Blue Ribbon Commission on the Audit Committee. I gave you a copy of the cover sheet of that report and the table of contents, and I actually have copies of the report if you choose to include that on the work plan. I read it. It's very plain language. I gave a copy to Dr. Yatman, very plain language, and I think offers a lot of really good suggestions for audit committees that I think would be pretty reasonably easy to implement. So with that, I have taken the privilege of, or taken the liberty, I guess, of drafting a committee work plan that is on ARM 59. But these are just suggestions to you. The items that are not bolded are items that really were carried over. They're kind of they're annual items that you normally have on your committee work plan. An audit services annual risk assessment, the review and approval of the audit plan, financial statement overview by the chief financial officer, receipt of the report on from the external auditors on the financial statements and on internal controls, as well as progress on the audit plan. So I've included those. Those are the non-bolded items that really carry over from year to year. And then the bolded items are basically my interpretation of the top 10, how we might see them as audit activities. And so it's really just for your discussion. If there is something you'd like to take off or include, this would be an opportunity to do that.
Committee members, comments on the work plan? Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments on the work plan. I think first it's important to point out that I find this very aspirational, the work plan. If you carefully go through it, I think you'll see that there's a lot of meat in here. Ambitious, yes, that's right. And so I think in that sense, I think it's a wonderful work plan, but it's nonetheless ambitious. And I think, especially now, it's probably appropriate to consider it fairly fluid. That there's the chance that not everything may actually make it to the forefront. If I were to make any recommendations, it may be the one about the relevant federal and state tax requirements and compliance risks. If one had to go, not that that's not important, I don't mean to suggest that, but if one had to go, I think that could go. And then I think there's one that kind of caught my eye, which is number 8, which is on ARM 56. And number 8 reads, set clear expectations for external and internal auditors. So, for example, it could be something along the lines of what sort of what are the expectations of the audit output? What sort of audit outputs we can expect to see? And I don't know if that could be part of this plan, or maybe that would be better for another plan coming up. But that one sort of caught my eye as a good one. But and I've said this to the CEO, or not CEO, to Chris Ford, that I think this is a wonderful work plan. It's certainly ambitious. It's full of a lot of meat, and I applaud her willingness at this time to take this on. I think it's fairly remarkable. It tells me that her social life is non-existent. But nonetheless, what I applaud is the substantial meat that I see in here, and I would like to encourage that, and I'm thankful for that.
Other comments? I had a few things, Chris, that were just leftovers, and I think we touched on them offline. One was we went through that committee self-assessment protocol, and I think we all decided it didn't quite work, and so on and so forth. And yet I do think it says somewhere in our policies that we must do a self-assessment. So I don't know exactly where you want to put that in or what protocol you want to use, but I do think we have an obligation to do that. So I think we need to put that in the work plan somewhere, and maybe you and Bob can decide how we want to define self-assessment.
Yes, I think the last tool was too complicated and not everything was relevant to this audit committee. So I would work with Bob. Maybe we would look for something else or create one that would better suit the committee. So, okay, I'll add that.
I do think we ought to have it on the, I don't know what our calendar, what's our calendar or timing when we have to do the self-assessment? How often does it say?
I have the charter. Yeah, it probably just says annually. Let's see.
I didn't bother to look it up. But at any rate, I think
I'll
if we...
take a look at it while we're doing that.
As you know, I'm a great believer, either do it or take it out. We can we can choose either way, but Okay,
Is there anything else other than,
Then I think
oh, every other year.
every other year. So when did we do it last?
I think,
So since you didn't do it this year, you do it next year.
yeah,
So
so
it should be in this plan.
it's probably in this plan, yeah.
So we should put somewhere in here that we have a
Okay,
self-assessment.
we'll do that.
I think in the February, the IT governance, I know when we left our last meeting on risk, and, which, by the way, thank you very much, it was excellent. I had to leave a little early, and Robin, that was a great job, and Janice, it was just a great job, very interesting. I think we did have a comment, I think Harry and Dana said it from the perspective of chair and vice chair, that you're going to sit down and figure out how the board should hear about IT. And we have here IT governance in February, and I would just encourage us to figure out what piece, if any, belongs to ARM versus what piece belongs to the board. There's no point in just perfunctorily doing something. I mean, our time is very limited, so however the board decides it wants IT reported to it, I'm not sure there is a need for us to have a secondary layer of reporting, and there's no point in chewing up time if we don't. Or if you think there is something specific because of issues related to our audits, you know, our specific function related to IT as opposed to just the whole risk future state architecture, I think that too, Bob, we should look at whether we should keep it or it should just entirely be subsumed into the report to the board. So I just would take some time with that to decide. Or maybe you already know, Chris, how you want to.
This wasn't meant to be the business renew governance, but I definitely agree, since that probably will form the bulk of the governance in the next couple of years, that we might move that item to the board if that's where the governance is going.
To figure out how we have, you know, Harry, I think you and Dana were both, or Dana said you were talking about how it should interface with the board. And if you want to have the ARM committee do a piece of it, and then a piece goes to the board, or we report on, or review. I don't think it makes, it's just, but I don't think we just don't want to be redundant. Robbie, did you have a comment? Yeah. Sometimes I think these things get into autopilot, and then you go, well, why did we chew up a bazillion hours of staff time to report to the audit committee when we report to the board the next day? Or vice versa, if you find it's too time-consuming at the board, or you want a higher level gloss and you want some more specifics, we're happy to go with whatever the board decision is. I just don't want to double up. Or
I'll be sure to communicate that with Dana.
okay, however you guys want to figure it out. And then there was just this issue, which I know has been lurking out there, of our charter being the Audits and Risk Committee. And I noticed we have operational risk in April, and here again, we may want to rename ourselves the Audit Committee. And you may want to just have risk defined at the board level as you do operational risk as a part of the system, and it's on a decentralized basis and it's managed that way. But or if we're going to have the word risk in our charter, then risk has to, I think, be defined as to what do we mean or what are we responsible for outside of audit risk. And this just goes to this whole brouhaha about risk. I mean, not brouhaha like it's inappropriate, but the whole thing has surfaced now as something we really need to focus on. And I think we've all agreed we don't want a risk manager. I mean, just another layer of bureaucracy is a headache for everybody. And that everybody is handling risks. And that's, I noticed, you know, your April commentary, Chris. So maybe it's appropriate after operational risks, what are they and how are they managed, to discuss the charter for the committee. But one way or another, I think we should try and resolve this issue of what is the scope of the committee, so that we don't keep the word risk if we're not doing overall management of risk, or if the enterprise is doing overall risk management, they expect us to get a report once a year, or we're not supposed to be involved. I think this can be crafted, whatever works for STRS and the board is fine. But at the moment, I just don't think we're right. We don't fit quite right, because we shouldn't be audits and risk management and then not have defined risk. Bob, you're sort of smiling at me. Is there any you want to add to this, or?
He's smiling. You know, again, I've had the advantage of having read the report that I'm suggesting that the committee just read and discuss in September, but it does somewhat address that, in that many boards are looking for that enterprise risk management, and for lack of any other place to put it, are kind of shoving it to the audits committee, but that may not be where it's appropriately placed. So that's why I thought, according to the report, so that's why I thought maybe after, if that's included in the audit plan after you've had an opportunity to have that discussion. There might be some, better illumination around where it might go. So,
It might not be hugely time consuming. I do think on our work plan should be a review of our charter. I mean, I think we should have it as an item
yes, we'll do it.
on the work plan, so we make sure we get to it and we put it to bed one way or the other.
Yes, okay. Review of the
And-
charter and specifically related to that issue of the enterprise risk management.
Yes.
Okay.
And here again, if you have anybody you want to have speak to us, or if senior management, Jack, if you've all sat down and decided how you want it handled and make a staff recommendation, I think we're just trying to be responsive to, we really should amend the charter. We should expand what it does, or we should, if we're responsible for the risk, we should be listening to it. If we're going to just keep it audits, then let's take it off our table and make a different committee. I don't have a bias here, because I think it's, in my own head, every operational department knows and understands its risks best and is essentially managing them, which is the operational risk. And I don't know quite how you define that upstream as another layer of oversight, but I'm happy to listen to whatever. I just don't want to create a murky situation. I think we need to clarify. Terry, did you have a?
Yes,
Okay.
I think I'm next.
Yeah, you are. Let me. Okay, Terry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I totally agree with you that we need to elevate this discussion, but I think my perspective would be that probably it's appropriate for, I'm not a big fan of another committee. I think this committee should elevate its enterprise risk management focus, whether, how that's accomplished. Maybe we can discuss it that upcoming board meeting as we proceed. But I think it's very appropriate for this committee. And if it takes more than 4 meetings in a year, we're talking about possibly expanding this committee at least by 1. I think we're in agreement on that. But I think the importance of enterprise risk management and audits and so on, they go hand in hand. But I think we should expand the role of this committee, expand the composition of this committee, and elevate that issue and keep it here.
Harry, can you go back in line? Sorry, there, yeah. Thank you, Terry. Okay. There.
So just on the comments that have been expressed by the chair and the vice chair, I think what might be appropriate is if I brought those comments back to the chair of the full board and worked and spoke with Jack about the interests that are here, that lie here, and perhaps how we, what are our options for the 11-12 to accomplish some of those goals, and what would be realistic to do so. Because my sense is that should probably be a decision and a conversation that the full board at some level is engaged with and on and supports. So I'll work with Jack and Dana to make sure that this message gets delivered back to the chair of the full board. I would like Bob just to, Mr. Yetman, to just expand upon your number 8, which is the clear expectations for external and internal auditors.
Okay, could I finish
Sure.
1 second before
Yeah.
we go there, Harry? I'm not sure of what, Harry, it isn't even maybe the responsibility of the board to decide how they want to define it and where they want to assign it, rather than our committee defining and assigning. In other words, whether the board if they want to decentralize risk management that's, say, over every department, then maybe like investments has a piece of its operation that looks at investment risk and it comes under that committee, and we stick with audit risk, or we have a separate risk function, and then there's some subset that comes back to the committee. I don't know if, in that sense, we ultimately need some more staff work on choices of best practices of what's been done in other operations. But I think we would be uncomfortable to say we know the answer about how this should be done. We just know there's a question, that it's sitting out there and it's not resolved how we're supposed to define risk. Because I think there's some different models.
As an organization or as a committee?
As an organization, how should CalSTRS define risk management? And therefore, where do they want to park the function of risk management? Do they want a function called risk management and risk and audits? I think we've all kind of categorically, Robbie, rejected the idea we want to run out and become part of the industry of risk managers. You know, that's no. But then we have this question of an investment risk. Is that all going to be handled in the investment committee, or for the risk and audit committee, do we have some responsibility for saying, gosh, there's an annual investment risk thing we should be looking? Because once you go enterprise risk, it doesn't fall under our classic audit function, and everybody's raised this question of we need to look at investment, we need to look at enterprise risk. So I think what I'm saying is here, I think there's a little give and take here where maybe the board wants to take some time or have Jack, I don't know if it would be even a session or a best practices or something, where you decide you have a choice. It can be diffused and all the committees have a risk function, or you want some piece of it to come back to audits and risk. I mean, we know we do audits. We just don't know what we're supposed to be doing with risk. And I think that needs to be clarified so that we can exercise ourselves responsibly. And right now, Robbie, it's just kind of out there. It says we manage risk, and we're all going, well, okay. what do you want us to do about that? Okay. So I just, maybe even the board decides and then just tells us what they want. I mean, we're interactive, but we're happy to do whatever the board's will is. Of course. Alrighty. Then you had this next.
One question, specific question for Mr. Yetman. Could you expand upon your position, why you think that issue of clearer expectations for internal and external auditors is something that you think the committee should address?
I'd be happy to, and I wish I could say that it was a deep thought, but it really wasn't. What I did is I went through the to-dos for the audit committees that on ARM 55 and 56 that Chris Ford prepared and put in your materials. And what she did is she really, and wisely so, I think, used this as the basis for designing the audit plan going forward. Sort of picked off the ones that sort of caught her eye as the biggest ones. And I just offered a modest suggestion, which is just maybe one could be pulled, maybe the tax one, and replaced with another one. It was nothing more than that.
Any more comments on the work plan? All right, Chris, do you have any other issues you want to raise to us?
Well, I think I would like clarification. So what I heard I'm going to add is committee self-evaluation in accordance with the charter and the last time we did it. So we'll look to see the last time we did it. If it wasn't done within the 2 years, then we'll put it on this work plan. If not, we'll move it to the next work plan. Add review of the charter, particularly with regard to the audit committee's responsibility for enterprise risk management.
In conjunction with the board.
Well, the review of the charter you probably want to have anyway, but yeah,
Okay.
somewhere in conjunction with a discussion with the board, we'll
board about
probably
that-
come
about
to
the
a
definition
decision
of-
about where that ERM responsibility
Yeah,
lies.
what's the definition of enterprise?
Right.
Where shall enterprise risk live, and how do you want to operationalize its review?
But you want that at the board level?
Well, I'm saying.
Because if it's at the
I-
committee level, it'll just be within the committee.
Well,
It
that's what
needs
I'm
to be
saying.
at
I
the
think
board.
it has to be some discussion between the board and the committee, because the committee shouldn't itself decide we're going to either have all the risk or not have all the risk, or it's going to be enterprise-wide. It's really a management and board decision how you want to allocate it, I think. And then as a committee, we're willing to take any responsibility you want to give us for oversight.
We
But
need a board agenda item before we move to the charter.
Okay, I see that. So
Yeah.
depending on when we're,
Yeah.
depending
We'll
on when we,
sequence that.
yeah, we'll have to sequence it, right?
right.
But I like
because
the idea of
we're
maybe
not
using one
here
of the
to do.
offsite days next year to maybe do a workshop like we did with Business Renew, but focusing on risk management.
Perfect.
That might be
Perfect.
very good.
Because the committee should not be making that decision. It should just be implementing whatever decision the board makes as to its piece of it.
Discussion, okay, we'll do that. Then I heard as a removal, I heard the IT governance one, because we really are talking about the Business Renew governance
it's in
being moved to the
conjunction.
board level.
It's conjunction with Robin and Janice. If you and Chris, if you feel there's a piece of it that should come to audits, again, let's do that. But I think at the moment, we've asked for regular updates on the IT to the board, and I just want to make sure again that we have a discrete bundle of activities that should come to audits, or we shouldn't be stepping in, we shouldn't duplicate.
So
There's-
only if no overlap with the Business Renew governance.
Right. Only
that is
if there's
set up.
something specific that
Okay.
doesn't overlap with the board that you feel we need to know because technology is so critical to getting our audits and financial statements out. But if it's not critical to us, then I don't think we should be redundant with the board.
Okay. And then I heard, I heard Dr. Yetman's comments about it being ambitious. I don't disagree that it's ambitious. These are just some thoughts. Do you want to take out the overview of the taxation requirements?
Sure.
I'm hearing yes. Okay, so that will go. And then I heard the possible substitution of the setting expectations for internal and external auditors as being put in its place.
Well, I think, Chris, unless I'm mistaken in what I heard, what we're really saying is we would love to have everything on that list done, and it's a workload issue that we want to be realistic about. And I mean, I'm happy to treat this as a work in process that we even revisit at the next meeting if you want to add or subtract. I mean, I don't know how do you, I think Bob's comment is more going to making sure that you have a life, and so you're happy to do the vast majority of this. And it's really, isn't that your real feeling? I mean, Chris, if you feel comfortable, all this can be accomplished.
Well, to be honest with you, some of the top half really would be, some of these things would be, most of these things would be presented by my colleagues, and I've already kind of warned them that this stuff was going on the Audits and Risk Management Committee work plan.
Unless anybody has an objection, if this is your judgment and you're the senior person management, I'm happy to go with it. And then I think if you see anything coming along that looks like it's just not going to be practical, you've been good about advising us about that in the past.
I mean, I did see these as in some ways really related to financial reporting risk, which is the audit committee's
Right,
primary
which is that is for
responsibility.
sure our
So
function.
things like, reviewing accounting changes, accounting assumptions, even ethics and compliance, those are potentially fraud-related. So, those things would seem fitting with your risk responsibilities outside of the enterprise. But I appreciate the idea that it could be fluid under the circumstances, and I think if we can accomplish it, I think it would be good to
Let's set it as the goal,
accomplish
and
it.
if there's a problem,
I
you
like
get back
stretch
to us.
goals, even for me.
Okay, okay. Any comments, more comments on the work plan from the committee? Anything else on our agenda? I think we're done. All right, is there any commentary from the public? We're so exciting, I expect everybody just to jump up and give us, these great comments. All righty, I think we're adjourned then. See everybody tomorrow.